be yourself. Of course, in an interview, you're trying to impress. More yourself you are, the better it is for the organization. Moving from one brand to the other, actually broadens your learning canvas. Build TV communication because India is still a TV heavy consuming country with a single TV household being the dominant demographics.
Hey there, welcome to Marketing Mavericks with Indiefolio. Today we have Kunal Malhotra with us, who's the Chief Marketing Officer at Taco Bell India. Kunal has a career expanding over 2 decades, where he's worked with some incredible companies like Dabur, Coca-Cola, L'Oreal, and Nestle. He's worked on some of the most iconic brands in the country. So we discuss all about QSRs and consumer products with him today and unpack his journey. Hey Kunal, thanks for your time and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Kavan. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm really excited and looking forward.
Likewise, I think I am very excited to unpack your journey, Kunal. The kind of companies you work with, be it Dabur, Coca-Cola, Nestle, and even right now at Taco Bell, are brands which a lot of young markets aspire to be at someday. But before we get into everything, I wanted to know, when is it that you decided you wanted to get into marketing? Because from what I know, you are an engineer.
Actually, when you think about it, my generation, the options of what you want to do in life were fairly limited. You would either become a doctor, an engineer, a CA, and then go on and become an MBA. Now, when I was in my grade 12, I was good in science, good in maths. So I said, "Chalo, let's go and do engineering." I I took an admission in engineering, and while I was doing my engineering, I realized that this is probably not something I want to do with my life. And at that point of time, honestly, the safest option of post grad was to do an MBA. So I, was lucky enough to crack an entrance exam, get into Symbiosis Institute of Business Management, Pune. And when we were in the second year deciding which stream of business management to go for, marketing was at that time, the more glamorous part of business management. So yeah, 20 years, 20 odd years hence, here I am sitting and talking to you on Marketing Mavericks.
I want to touch upon that, right? I feel there are a lot of people who are tuning into this who may want to make that jump. Maybe they've done commerce or engineering or whatnot, and they're curious about marketing. You must be, I think, in your early 20s when you made that plunge. People are so scared to do that today because they've spent a long time studying something, maybe even convincing their social circle, their parents. What gives you the confidence to make that jump today? Because people fear that they'll be left 3 years behind or 5 years behind, etc.
Actually, my belief is a little different here, Kavan. I think kids today have a lot more freedom to, pivot, make changes at any given point of time. And I think they are far more confident than we were to make those plunges. It's I think the generation today believes it's never too late to do the right thing, to do what in quotes can be called as they're calling. And I think that's pretty cool because honestly, the fears you're talking about were actually more prevalent during our time. लोग क्या कहेंगे, नेबर को बोल दिया बेटा इंजीनियरिंग कर रहा है, MBA कर रहा है, so after that आप क्या करने वाले हो. So I think those questions, those societal pressures from external forces used to be there. Now I think it's a lot more, to my mind, it's a lot more cooler and a lot more convenient for kids to take that call because I think the ecosystem supports that. So my advice to anybody who's listening to this and is thinking about it is to say, don't overthink, do what you want to do, and it's never too late to make the plunge. I mean, I am in the QSR business. Classic example is Colonel Sanders of KFC. Started KFC in his 60s, right? We've got so many examples in India as well of people who started something of their own in their 60s and and did exceedingly well in that. So don't take any pressure. Just do what your heart wants you to do. Just follow your dreams, follow your passion, and just don't be worried about where you will be in a race. Because as one person, someone told me during my B school days, life is not a sprint; it's a marathon. It doesn't matter if you start a bit behind; you can always make up.
So well put, you know. I must say that while you're right, a lot of people do think from the lens you spoke, there's a huge chunk of, you know, young folks who are so scared about all the social signals going around them, because I think a lot of people feel that there's a lot many people they'll disappoint compared to maybe 20, 30 years ago, because again the way the systems are structured. And I think this would be, I think, solid advice for anybody who's scared or confused when they're young, you know, about kind of doing an undo and restarting something. I wanted to now ask you, you know, you, I believe your first job was at Dabur where you managed real, right?
Yes.
Again, you know, cracking a company like that right out of college is hard for a lot of people in their mind. What's a good advice for anybody who's wanting to work in a large FMCG giant like Dabur? How to kind of crack it, and what are the right roles they should look out for?
My advice is whether the organization is a large giant or an up and coming startup. What you should seek out of it is what your learning is going to be. What are the experiences you will get? So when I got the opportunity to interview with Dabur from campus, I still remember. It's very funny. You know, when you're in a campus placement environment, you're doing the usual preparation about yourself and what you've done, and you do a little bit of research about the organization. And I went in there early morning, 7 a.m. Campus interview, and the first question the panel asked me was, "Do you know what the share price of Dabur is?" And I had no clue. I had no clue. So, one part of my brain said, kuch number bolte, it doesn't matter. Just sort of faff. The other side of my brain said, just be honest and say, this I didn't look it up, right? And I think in hindsight, I probably made the right call of listening to the second part of my brain, and I actually said, listen, I don't know, I didn't look it up, and I don't want to take a guess also, because it would be like a completely wayward guess. And I think somewhere, of course, there was a lot more to the interview than just this, but I think somewhere that perhaps set the whole tone, because when the hiring manager later sort of met me when I joined, they said, what, the one thing which struck us was that you were not trying too hard to sort of please us, or too hard to impress us. You were being sort of yourself, and I think to me that's the biggest thing. Just be yourself. Of course, in an interview you're trying to impress. Of course, in an interview you're trying to get that job. But the more original you are, the more yourself you are, the better it is for the organization and the hiring people to also make a decision. The other part to it is, when you choose an organization to work or a role to work, I think always, and this is after 22 years of making those mistakes over and over again, always choose the work and the learning over designation, right? Always look at always choose rigor over glamour, right? Glamour is going to come, right? But once you get into the rut of not putting enough rigor, or not sort of going through the entire sort of steps to a particular thing, you will never get that back, right? So I think that is very, very important. Always choose an organization which is giving you an opportunity to learn, rather than a flashy organization with a flashy designation where you're probably, as a brand manager, you're 10th in line on that brand. Doesn't give you anything. All you'll probably be doing is making printouts, and possibly making doing spell checks on presentations.
I want to ask, how does somebody who's young, who's talking to a senior manager in a big company, actually identify how the role is like? You know, I
Yeah,
see a lot of students being like, oh, this big company's made an offer, I should just say yes. You know, who am I to
yeah,
ask questions?
yeah.
So did you have similar thoughts? What kind of questions should one ask to understand how your job will look like?
No, absolutely. I mean, when you are fresh out of, when you're in campus, sitting for a placement, you don't have the experience, or at least 22 years back, you didn't have the experience to gauge what the role is. And in any case, campus placements, companies don't really hire for roles, they just hire for a particular division function, right? I also did the same. I said, oh, a company like Dabur has given me a placement offer. I have to take it. I mean, it is so cool. I think today's kids are a little more involved and a little more informed about the organizations. The organizations also try a bit harder to sort of woo the kids, especially from the from decent tier B schools. So my suggestion would be that use whatever network you have. You have some seniors in that organization, some friends, somebody just check with them, ask what the working environment is, how much emphasis does that organization put on learning and development, especially of young managers hired from these schools. And I think then take a call. But
Hmm.
but at the end of the day, I mean, you also have to keep in mind that with organizations like Dabur, with Unilever, with ITC, with Nestle, you usually won't go wrong.
So I want to ask you, there are so many consumer startups hiring right now. I'm also a startup. I keep on getting pings from all these tier A colleges also to hire interns, and I think companies like young companies, even who are doing maybe 50 crores, 100 crores, may be keen to hire somebody who's an expert. So what should be in your opinion, like what are the pros and cons of joining like a big company, like a giant in the start of your career versus joining a startup in the start of your career? What should I choose?
It's not an easy choice, and I think it's it depends on the individual and the role which is there on the table. But probably the pros of joining a large organization is an established set of processes. So learning to work within processes, to understand and appreciate why those processes exist and what they do to minimize the risk of failure. A large organization also gives you, as a young person joining, opportunities which are varied in nature. If you take Nestle as an example, you could join as an assistant brand manager on, say, Maggie sauces, and then move on. After a couple of years, maybe have a stint in sales, then have a stint in e-commerce, and then come back to brands as maybe brand manager on Nescafe. So that kind of a diverse experience only a large multi-category organization can provide you. The third thing which a large organization gives you as a huge advantage is the ability and the bandwidth to fail a bit also. So to try and fail a bit, because you're talking of huge brands, huge sort of huge budgets, brands built over years. You can afford to try something new and fail and learn from those, and then sort of become better. So I think that's what established organizations can do for you. Up and coming startups, well, they will teach you to hustle. They will teach you to break all molds, break all rules, and try and sort of do something new every day. They will teach you to super focused on return on investment, and they will teach you to pivot super quick. So I think it depends now what do you want to do, an established
Right.
process driven setup which has its own pluses, or a setup which is like super quick, which is going to teach you how to hustle and teach you how to pivot very quickly, and you become more street smart. I think that's the choice you make.
So well put. I also now want to ask you: was there a difference between working for an Indian giant like a Dabur versus MNCs like a Nestle and a Coca Cola? Did you see any differences?
See, culturally, yes, they are different. An Indian organization versus an American and even a European. So they are
Yeah.
culturally very, 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 very different. I think
Could you share some of your favorites on from a culture standpoint?
so. When I was at Coca-Cola being an American giant was, quintessentially American. Flamboyant, sort of, a lot of fun, and, doing big things. And at Coca-Cola, very early in my career, I got exposed to, you know, big ticket partnerships, IPL, with Amir Khan, and with so basically Coke was all about, you know if I can use the phrase from another brand, live life king size, right?
Hmm.
Nestle is quintessentially Swiss, very very sort of uh, very focused, but very keen on staying under the radar. I don't want to be, seen, and I don't want to be like, I'm not flamboyant, very, very sort of natural, and, going for doing big things, but then not making a huge noise about it, right?
Sure.
And an Indian organization is I think somewhere in the middle where they're trying to find their feet. As we don't want to be super flamboyant, because again, as Indians, we are, as culturally, not very very flamboyant set of people. And we also don't want to be very very under the radar also, because we want to be seen and we want to be taken notice also. I think culturally those are some of the differences which set these organizations apart. And I'll give you an example of, of how that culture kind of translates. And Coca-Cola folks, please forgive me, but I really used to love this part of Coke when I was there. Yeah, in our office we used to have this small passage, and that passage was used in office during office hours to play cricket, right? And we used to have this cool terminology called the MODG, which is called the middle of the day game, where we'll sort of play just after lunch. And that game was a bit of an equalizer, where you'll have the vice president marketing and the intern playing together, and you would have cases where the intern is sort of berating the vice president marketing for dropping an easy catch, or getting out on a ball which did not deserve to be for one to get out. So I mean, it's a very small example. I'm sure there are a lot of cool, fun things a lot of companies do, but it was that half an hour where there was a lot of fun, a lot of relaxation, but a lot of bonding as an organization, as a team.
Incredible. I think I didn't give it too much thought about how American and Swiss also would be different. And school, I think, from the outside perspective, it all seems very similar because you're selling these products. But it's good to get like a behind the scenes from you. Um, Another thing I wanted to ask, especially in a company like Nestle, in fact, actually, all the companies you worked at, I constantly see every 1 to 3 years you're shifting from one brand to the other brand. So it could be juice or chocolate or energy. I mean, aerated drinks, etc. How uh, how have you mastered this ability capability to tune out of a brand and tune into another brand? Because as somebody who represents a network of, let's say, creative studios, we always are told you better get the brand, if you want to work with us. And I wonder, a Nescafe sometimes is extremely different as a product only, to another product, like probably like a Milky Bar or a Munch. So how is it that you've been able to, what's your advice rather to brand managers right now who would probably shifting in a large scope to adapt and become very good at it?
I think it's interesting because the two or three brands you mentioned are all three brands which I had an opportunity to work on
Right.
during my stint at Nestle. So I think, to me, and there are different schools of thought here. One school of thought is to say you start on a brand and then grow in that brand and eventually head that brand, right? The other school of thought is, the Nestle school of thought, where you start in something, you move on to something else, and you back, and you could move sort of categories and brands and sort of grow. Uh, I would say that, you know, moving from one brand to the other actually broadens your learning canvas. if I'm only working on an Nescafe and I'm growing sort of vertically, then I'm becoming a coffee expert, right? I'm becoming a Nescafe expert. Whereas then I know everything there is to know about coffee. But when I'm changing brands and categories from coffee to chocolate to dairy to Maggie, I am getting this wonderful opportunity to understand the consumers, their insights. What do they look for from a brand in that category in different context, keeping the overall context of food and beverage, right? The
Hmm.
same. So, to me, that makes you a better professional overall because once and sets you up for leadership roles, right?
Hmm.
Because if I want to go and become the head of Nestle in India, then it helps if I understand coffee and chocolates and food, and everything. And even if I happen to, choose a way outside of, choose a path outside of Nestle, the fact that I have been adaptive enough to sort of navigate through different brands and categories sets me up for a successful tenure later. I've always believed that a person and my favorite sport in the world is cricket, so I often draw parables from cricket. A cricketer who's technically sound can play all three formats. There's just a question of a little bit of adaptation, adapting to that environment, right? I think it's the same in marketing, right? If your marketing fundamentals are strong and you're sort of honing them as you go along your career, then it could be any brand, any category. You should be okay. You just need that little bit of adapting to adjust to that changed context, and you'll be fine. So, yeah, that's my take. I mean, my suggestion is go for as diverse brand experiences as you can get.
Awesome. I think it really helps you sharpen your first principles, of marketing. Because at the end of the day, it's the same customer with different needs,
Absolutely.
and it just helps you kind of get that very well, and it will make you really powerful if you're able to sell
Absolutely.
various things to various people. Now coming to Taco Bell, so you spent all over a decade in Nestle, and before that several years in FMCG. How is it that you decided to jump to QSR, and how what's the whole story of you joining as CMO?
So I have been by default, not so much by design. Spent pretty much my entire career in food. Whether it was real active juices and pastes in Dabur to water and Maza at Coke to then coffee and then eventually chocolates at Nestle. And when after I spent about 11 years at Nestle, and I was like, I've now worked on brands which others have built over the years, and there's a legacy of theirs which is there. That legacy, creating legacy bug kind of bit me and said, यार अपना भी कुछ बनाते हैं यार, अपना भी कुछ legacy होना चाहिए. 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the line, somebody would say, okay, somebody called Kunal had at some point of time worked on this brand, which I am today sort of very happy and lucky to work on. And I didn't want to honestly go too far outside the food category,
Hmm.
because that's something I worked all my life. I understand that, or I believe I understand that to a certain extent. And then Taco Bell came along, and there were two things which excited me about it. One, it was food, but a very different kind of food. Uh, the other was that it was the smallest of the top QSR players in the country. To me, the opportunity which was really compelling was the opportunity to take this brand, which is right now extremely small, extremely limited in terms of its reach, and sort of build it to something which is much bigger, and then where it can then compete with the big boys of the QSR industry and sort of hold its own. And to create this new Mexican inspired cuisine category in India. So that was what sort of really attracted me about this role, and here I am trying to sell, those crescent moon shaped beautiful objects called tacos to the Indian consumers.
Awesome. You mentioned in an interview that tacos are something a lot of Indians don't even know. So, what was the insight behind, Taco Bell coming to India, and why do they think they'll be successful?
So, I mean, a lot of people don't know tacos in India. That's a fact. It's changing, but it still is the overarching fact. And I believe that when Taco Bell had decided to enter India many years back, the whole belief was that the Indian market is is ripe for QSR expansion, and like the rest of the world, where there is this, if I can use the word, fatigue with burgers and pizzas. The people want to have something which is exciting and a bit different. And therefore, there is a space for tacos to come and establish and grow. The other thought process I believe the guys who got Taco Bell into India at that point of time would have had was that, while the cuisine is very alien, the ingredients are very familiar. You use beans, which in some parts of the country are like, rajma. You use rice. You use, the spices, and everything else is kind of it's all very familiar to the Indian context. So I think that
Right.
was the belief with which it entered India. But I think where it sort of over the last so many years probably missed a little bit of trick was to say that yes, while the ingredients are unique, how do I make the end product, which is the taco or the burrito or the quesadilla, so unique, build in so much novelty in it that people really want to go out and try those, right?
Hmm.
Because unlike the burgers and pizzas, tacos did not have the luxury of Hollywood and Archie's comics building those categories for Indian consumers, right?
Hmm.
When I was growing up, we used to read about hamburgers in Archie's, right? Or see pizza joints in Hollywood movies. Tacos had nothing of that to build the category. And therefore, that's the job we are in right now, to say, okay, we will build the category context for Mexican inspired cuisine. And, by being like the only big credible player in that category in India, sort of build it into an established category and brand in the country.
Exciting. I feel like Taco Bell is something I've had a lot. I think my entire family loves Taco Bell because Mexican food really blends well with the Indian palate. And I remember going to USA several years ago and trying it with my mom, who's a vegetarian, and somehow Taco Bell had some really good veg options in America also several years ago. She loved it. So when it came, we were pretty excited. I wanted to know, when you're setting up such a marketing strategy for a brand in India right now, how important are these quick commerce and food delivery apps in that, right? Do you see the likes of Zomatos and Swiggies being enablers and catalysts, or do you think potentially that they could be people who could be threats, especially because of them not sharing customer data with
Post COVID, there was a massive shift in consumer behavior. In fact, during COVID, a lot of people were at home, and these quick commerce and food delivery aggregators really sort of exploded. And I think the Indian consumer has now become super comfortable with ordering in, right? So, delivery aggregators for a QSR brand or for a restaurant brand is almost almost an integral part of our business growth. It's safe to say that it's hard to survive or grow without them in today's day and age. It's anywhere between 40-50% of a brand's revenue when it comes to the QSR space, which is insane. So in that uh, sort of with that view, they are definitely an enabler because they are making your brand accessible to a lot more customers through delivery route. And people don't have to go out navigate through this not so comfortable traffic situation in India. To reach a restaurant and then think about parking and then go to your restaurant and eat their food. Now they can do it at the comfort of their homes. So what at some point of time all brands will have to assess is to say, while this 35-40% business is big and attractive and you want it, brands will have to figure out how that business sits from an impact on bottom line perspective, and therefore how much harder the offline part of the business needs to work for the overall brand bottom line to be stronger. So I think that's the role I see for these aggregators. Very important, definitely helping in expanding business. But at some point of time, you know, the impact they have on profitability is a big question mark.
Talking about how you mentioned that maybe initially what Taco Bell should have focused more on is creating more unique propositions. I keep on seeing a lot of product innovation chatter on your LinkedIn profile and the new flavors which are coming out. If I'm not wrong, a lot of QSRs, even in 90s, early 2000s, saw success when they changed their product lines altogether. And in fact, QSRs are known to localize menu for every country which they tap into. Can you tell me a little bit more about how that works, right? How does a giant QSR brand actually create a new flavor? I'd love to know more about that.
Before that, I think the importance of innovation in the QSR growth story is something which is, probably not appreciated enough, at least in the last 2 or 3 years. About 15, 20 years back, what was probably the golden era of QSRs in India. Uh, QSRs were built on innovation, right? Because these innovative products or these products which were amazingly tasty and gave multi-textural and multi-sensorial experiences to consumers were uh, a, a break from the routine
Hmm.
for Indian consumers, and therefore, people thronged to these QSR places to say, "Hey, I'm gonna have XYZ burger or ABC pizza or anything like that." I think over the last maybe 2 or 3 years, brands, in order to chase top line growth, have somewhere forgotten this very important cornerstone called innovation. And there hasn't been a lot of innovation in the category over the last 2 3 years. In fact, brands have probably gone the other end of the spectrum and have been very busy chasing more transactions through double digit price points and, whole focus on value.
Hmm.
89, 99 double digit price points. I mean, there's no end to it actually. And, and I think somewhere that has had a bit of an effect or impact on the category where people are not finding enough novelty in visiting a QSR anymore, uh,
Hmm.
and are probably therefore choosing to graduate straight to fine dine restaurants which are providing that experience and those very unique dishes to consumers. So I think somewhere the category needs to balance this whole value versus innovation game to say, hey, both are important and both need to sort of go hand in hand, which is something what we've tried to do at least in the last sort of 12 to 12 odd months, where we've said that while we'll focus on value and we'll also give huge value for money and value price points to consumers to bring them in through the door, but we will also excite them and give them great food experiences through these food innovations, whether it is the latest cheesy lava taco which we've launched, which is like unlike any other taco, or I would actually go on to say unlike any other QSR product which exists in the category. So, I think that's a point on innovation which somewhere the category QSR category seems to be missing out on in the last couple of years.
I think right now, just to add on, I see so many brands starting today. I think it should make a lot of companies uncomfortable that it's just a matter of somebody really loving it and them telling their 10 friends, and everybody can just order with the tap of a button and
Yes,
they'll just take away that share of voice any moment. I really feel
absolutely,
I try so many products in a quarter based on what my friends recommend. It's pretty insane.
absolutely.
You mentioned this product. Do you think you could take that as an example and kind of tell us the journey behind coming up with how do you go about deciding a new product, a new flavor, and then kind of marketing that?
When we were sort of working on this cheesy lava taco, the whole idea was to bring in an indulgent product in our core category of tacos, and build it as such a unique product that it not only compels my existing Taco Bell users to upgrade to this taco, but actually compels somebody who's a burger lover to actually shift to this product, because we built this product in a way that it gives you an elevated food experience, and something which some parts of this product give you an experience of what, say, a burger would give you, but then there is always a lot more in that product packed in to give you a much more elevated experience, and therefore compelling you to say, hey, I'm going to actually try this product instead of say a burger. Now, why burgers? Because it is the one of the biggest QSR categories in the country, growing super fast. A recent study I saw, it's growing at about 1.3x the growth of pizzas in this country. And a very random search on any aggregator of the word burger will give you, I don't know, maybe 100 players offering you burgers
Right.
from value to gourmet, right? So the objective was, can we create a product which is so unique, so indulgent, and if I may use the word, so sexy that it sort of gets in some consumption occasions or transaction occasions from a huge category like burgers. So that was the brief. The other, from a product perspective, the the requirements therefore were that it had to be multi-textural and multi-sensorial, and it had to give you, a melange of experience when you take a bite in your mouth, right? So
Mhm.
this product is actually crispy on the outside. It's got a crunchy taco shell then inside, so it's crunchy from the inside. It's got three very amazing sauces, the spicy lava sauce, the smoky barbecue pepper sauce, and a fresh sour cream dressing which is there in there. And then it had a patty inside, which would, depending on whether it's veg or non-veg, would be, so in case of chicken, it will have chicken and then sort of liquid cheese inside. So when you bite into this product, you're getting first a crunchy experience the outside, and as you further sort of go through the bite, you get sorry, initially you get a crispy experience. When you go through the bite, you get a crunchy experience, and then the sauces come into play. And once you bite through the patty, the chicken sort of and the chicken and the liquid cheese sort of comes into your mouth. So it gives you, in one
Mhm.
bite, it takes you from spicy to cheesy to smoky to crunchy to crispy. So it's like, almost when you can call it like a loaded with more product. Whatever
Mhm.
experience you are getting from the product you like, there is always an experience more in this product. So that was the ask which we gave to our food development team and our brilliant chef to create a product like that. And voila, we have this product which is, you know I think it's the best taco in the country. And
Wow.
I know it's my own product, and you tend to be a little more generous with compliments with your own product. But I think it is possibly one of the best products in the country in the QSR space right now.
Fantastic. I feel so hungry just listening to you for the last few minutes.
That was the idea.
I feel like I wanted to know how much of this is you understanding, okay, this is what my customers want, and then developing a product, or how much is it more like, hey, this is the gap, I'm going to sell this product to the consumers, like how do you go about understanding yaar, ye chalega ki
So there is this idiom or saying called familiarity breeds contempt. And last year in October, when we did a large consumer work to understand what people think of Taco Bell, what do they expect from a QSR, and therefore what are we offering, stroke not offering to the consumers. And the one telling feedback was that बॉस आप क्रंची टाको बोल रहे हो है तो वो पापड़ ही ना राइट या फिर आप आप बुरीतो में राजमा और चावल ही तो डाल रहे हो राइट नाउ दैट वाज समथिंग व्हिच इज वेरी हार्ड हिटिंग बिकॉज़ you know on one hand you are thinking that the familiar ingredients are possibly stepping stones to you building that category, but actually what the consumer is telling you is that बस अगर मैं मेरे घर में मिलने वाले राजमा चावल मेरे को टाको बेल में खाने हैं तो my mom makes it better no at home, right? Or papad is like there's no big deal about papad. And that's when it sort of hit us that what the consumer is looking for is novelty. And by novelty I don't mean we'll stop selling crunchy tacos or we'll stop putting rice and beans in our product. But what do you make out of those ingredients? What do you make out of that crunchy taco is what is going to change the game for us and in terms of what we are offering to the Indian consumers. And that's when we started working on our portfolio, on our menu. So, if there's somebody who went and had Taco Bell food somewhere around October, November, and they have Taco Bell food today, there'll be a completely different, a significantly elevated experience. And the whole focus has been to say, how can we build Taco Bell as a brand which offers food which is distinct and desirable, right? So we were always distinct because हमारा shape अलग है. Everything is round in this country. Round burgers, round pizzas. We were the only one who said, यार moon shaped product है, roll है, कैसा दिया है. A lot of people struggle to even pronounce it, right? But so we were distinct. But how can we build desirability with that distinctiveness was the key, and that is the fulcrum of our entire work on the brand and entire innovation pipeline to say, is the product which we are developing distinct and is it desirable?
superb. Thanks a lot for unpacking that. I now want to cover marketing and campaigns, sorry, campaigns mainly. And I want to know, where are you, uh, who are you targeting the most right now? Like, for example, I see that I saw that Gen Cool G campaign where there's a series of things, and it was targeted towards Gen Z. Is that the area of growth you predict, or is it more penetrating to the masses in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, or is it Gen Z pan India? Be where they are. I just was curious about that.
So it might sound super cliched, and probably 8 out of 10 marketeers you speak to tell you the same thing. But I mean, Gen Z are definitely the biggest red fish TG for our brand. They are the ones who are open to newer experiences. They are the ones who are happy to, these days they also have a little bit of money to sort of spend behind those experiences, and therefore they become a bit of an automatic choice to target. Also, because by nature. brand Taco Bell was launched in 1962 in the US, with the core of rebelling against the prevailing love for burgers and pizzas. So Glenn Bell उस समय would have thought कि यार दुनिया तो सिर्फ burgers और pizzas खा रही है. Let me sort of challenge this status quo and give them something which is very very different. Since Gen Z don't like to go with the flow, they like to challenge the status quo, which is also one of the DNAs, which is in the DNA of our brand. It became a very very natural sort of connect which we want to build with the Gen Z TG. Uh, but referring to the campaign you mentioned, that was the first mass media campaign which Taco Bell ever did in India. And I think at that point of time, the key objective was to establish Taco Bell as a cooler, newer alternative to uh, burgers and pizzas, which have been around for so many years. So, talk to the Gen Z and tell them that, listen, here's this exciting new portfolio of food, which is very different and very unique compared to the ubiquitous world of burgers and pizzas, and something which probably has been around since your parents' generation, and therefore build Taco Bell as the new food for the new generation. And
Hmm.
therefore, using humor as a device, we had phrases like, hey, we are not Gen AGOG, Sunoji, right? Or we're not Gen G, Boss G, which in some ways connects with the Gen Zs of today who don't want to be tied down by hierarchy, who don't want to be tied down by ऐसा ही चलता है तो ऐसा ही करेंगे approach. So it was a very challenger campaign from a challenger brand, and I think that was the whole objective with which we put it out. And I mean, I'm glad that you picked that up because that was the intent.
Incredible. Talking about campaigns, I want to know, and you've been making campaigns for so many years with so many iconic brands with so many collaborators. There's a lot of chatter around how the creative content stack is evolving. I've seen brands in housing today, like big legacy companies have a 30-member, 50-member, sometimes 80-member teams in house doing creative. People say that maybe it's the end of the AOR relationship or the big retainer. And I also see people do things otherwise, where there's a hybrid model or they continue having that and believe that that relationship will exist, especially the kind of companies you worked at. So, what's your stance here if somebody was to, let's say, build a marketing stack or a creative stack for their campaigns? What's the right approach?
So the answer to that is there is no right approach, uh, or there is no wrong approach,
Right.
whichever way you want to look at it. Um, you know, the communication landscape, because of the fact that almost 8 out of 10 brands in this country are wanting to talk to the Gen Z and now Gen Alpha TGs, it's evolving at a pace which is unimaginable, right?
Hmm.
Uh, how you build a campaign, what constitutes a campaign is changing at such a rapid pace that it's at time it gets a bit hard to keep pace with that. When I had started out, you would build a TV spot, you would have print around it, a radio campaign, outdoor, and you're pretty much done, right?
Right.
Sorted. There's like a huge buzz. Everybody is talking about you. These days, that all that is actually not enough and maybe even irrelevant, right?
Hmm.
These days, what gets talked about is what goes viral, what is shared on social media, on WhatsApp forwards, right? Meme marketing has come up. There are brands who ace that. I mean, Zomato, Swiggy, I think they are like kings of that kind of marketing. There are brands which are which are which bet very big on influencer marketing, right? There is this huge debate between celebrities versus influencers, right? And what works. So I think
Right.
it's again horses for courses, to my mind, for big legacy brands. It is probably still important to build TV communication because India is still a TV heavy consuming country with a single TV household being the dominant demographics. So TVs still will give you the widest amount of reach. But at the same time, even these legacy brands are now working very hard and sort of focusing a lot on these short duration creatives, influencer marketing, meme marketing, etc. And focusing on that and sort of getting that out. Now, if you have to get that out, knowing the fact that your TG has insanely small attention span, and the whole swipe culture is super prevalent, you need to create a ton of creative at very high speeds, and that
Right.
that has resulted in either the creative stack becoming in-house or brands evolving from one agency on record, which will be like my full service agency, to say, hey, this is my agency for creatives, which are sort of my TV creatives, and I will have these four agencies, one of which will work on social creatives, one of which will work on influencer, one of which will work on meme marketing, and so on and so forth. And actually, there is, you know, if all of them can work together, then it actually creates magic for a brand.
I have, a little bit of a selfish question to ask you. So we are like a network of founders, boutique studios, creative agencies, production houses, as well as independent consultants. And I think I am seeing what you're seeing, right? A lot of people are big brands like yours are actually open to partnering with young talent and young studios and 10-member companies because of the fragmentation. What do you think differentiates a great agency from a good agency? Since a lot of people will tune into this, I'm sure they'd love to know that from you.
Very early in my career, one of my bosses had once told me there are no good or bad agencies, there are only good or bad clients. And I think there is, if you think about it, there is a lot of truth in this. I believe that these days, clients are probably a bit lazy when it comes to the most critical part of developing a campaign, which is the brief. I'm not sure a lot of rigor goes in writing the brief these days compared to 20 22 years back. Of course, there is less time, less bandwidth, all of that is there, but I still believe it's again, I'll go back to cricket. It's like saying, I'll not practice 10 hours a day like people used to do 20 years back and still become a great cricketer. You may, if you're a freak and a generational genius, but more often than not, you'll probably stumble at some point if you're not putting in those hard yards. I think what sets apart a good from a great agency is a great agency will always challenge you, will always ask you and push you, ask you questions, make you uncomfortable, and push you to think beyond what you have already thought. See, as people working on the brand, after a couple of years on a brand, we start to becoming a little too closed
Yeah.
in our approach, in our view to that brand. हमको लगता है जो हमें दिख रहा है वही सच है. And I
Right.
think the job of a a great agency partner is to challenge you and ask you, यार ये क्यों नहीं कर सकते, right? इसको ऐसे क्यों नहीं कर सकते, right?
Mm.
The other trait of a great agency is to be not afraid to take chances and try something new. And it's okay if you fail. I mean, worst क्या होएगा, client चिल्लाएगा थोड़ा सा, but it still is worth the amount of learning the entire group gets. Now, of course, I'm not saying that you go out and make $1 million mistakes, right? Mistakes भी छोटी हो तो palatable होती हैं, but you know that's where India as a country is such a blessing to be working with, because it's such a huge country. You can always do a small pilot and fail
Yeah.
and improve and scale it up, or do a pilot, do good, and then scale it up and do great at a pan India level. So I think, you know to long story short, I think a great agency will always push you, will always challenge you, will never be afraid to try something new and take chances. And they should also be demanding from the client, give me a well written brief, give me a clearly thought out brief, right? Give me, don't beyond the point, don't backseat drive everything. Otherwise, तो आप ही बना लो ना creative. मतलब and I have been guilty of that. Let me be very honest and put my hand up to say, अरे लोगो इतना बड़ा कर दो, लोगों को लेफ्ट से राइट कर दो, ये कर दो, वो कर दो. I mean, to some extent it's fine, but beyond the point, I mean, you've hired those guys to do a job. Let them do their job, right? I mean, as long as they are not going completely wrong, and they are not saying कि मतलब मैं कोका कोला का क्रिएटिव ब्लू कलर में बनाऊंगा, right? Give them some freedom and space to work their magic. So I think it's a give and take, but yeah, that's what I'd expect from a great agency, and that's what the young agencies are doing, because like the young people of today, they're fearless. वो डर नहीं है अकाउंट चला जाएगा, client गाली देगा. That fear is not there. So therefore they're able to voice their opinion and say, you know what, I think you're wrong here, and I think we should do this.
Wow, Kunal, this is like so refreshing to hear from people on the other side. So thank you for that. We are almost at time, and I want to get into the last one, two questions. One thing I wanted to ask you is your thoughts on why India so far has still not gotten like a global QSR chain from here, right? Do you think that there's an opportunity there? Do you feel there are some companies who are doing a good job, or what do you think is the opportunity for an Indian company? Which food category should be exciting if anybody wants to build in this space?
I mean, if you think about it, one of the most globalized cuisine in the world is the Indian food. Uh,
Yeah,
I mean, butter chicken is the national dish of the United Kingdom. It's insane, right? So, why India doesn't have a global QSR, I don't know, honestly. Right? I think that, with my guess is that with the amount of people which are there in India, most Indian QSR players they continue to be super excited in fulfilling the Indian local demand itself, and that itself gives so much of growth year on year, that and keeps sort of challenging and pushing you, that you don't have the bandwidth to take a breath and say, hey, you know what, I can actually go out with this and build it into a bigger thing. It's probably that. I'm not too sure. Uh, will there be an Indian QSR chain which is everywhere? I absolutely believe that that's going to happen at some day. Will it be, the Punjabi cuisine, or will it be the South Indian cuisine? Will it be some other cuisine? I don't know, but I think they would definitely be huge at a global landscape. Something which is in the food and beverage, but not necessarily in food, and a couple of brands I think are doing a really cool job, at least in India, and I think they have the potential to take that global. Is I think Blue Tokai. I think they're doing a phenomenal job in redefining the coffee cafe landscape in this country. Um, and I've had the good fortune of meeting and interacting with the three founders, and I think there's a really amazing set of people.
absolutely. I think Blue Tokai is a favorite, and I'm glad that you said that there's a big opportunity. I feel that if people can take away something there, I passionately believe that it's a good time. India has got great branding, a lot of good things happening organically for it. We're even seeing, music go viral, which is made
Yes.
in India, being played in clubs these days. So it's a pretty good time, I think, to launch something like that. Just jumping to my last question now, Kunal. It's beyond our time already, and I wanted to know from you, if you could rewind, let's say 20, 30 years back, and you were just kicking off, your career, what's a good advice you'd give to yourself if somebody wanted to one day become a CMO?
I think I said that in the beginning of this podcast, Gavan. I think you know we always chase learning uh, versus designations. Always chase learning the brass tacks of a particular field, and not just marketing but any other field, versus versus just versus glamour, right?
Hmm.
And more specifically to marketing, you know, uh, there are always believe and try and get it in your formative years if you can. Uh, Non filmmaking marketing experience. You know,
Hmm.
a very close friend of mine, an ex colleague, recently came out with this concept of the boring and unboring in marketing. And I think, you know, and I'll give the credit, Rashi Goyal, one of my ex-colleagues at Nestle and Coke, sort of came up with this, wrote about this recently, and it really instantly struck a chord with me because what people usually think of marketing is celebrities, film banayenge, big budget, big budget campaigns, big launches, but actual marketing happens when you do the boring stuff, uh, or what I would like to call, or what Rashi calls, that is the unboring stuff. These celebrities and films are all what she calls, and I agree with her, the boring stuff of marketing. ये हर marketer कर रहा है, right?
Hmm.
What will add to your repertoire and make you a stronger marketer is the unboring stuff, which is to look at something which is not this glamorous, to say, what did you do a packaging innovation, right? Did you do and how well did you do a product innovation, right? A new launch, an expansion into a new geography or into a new country. I think that will make you a much stronger marketeer than making big budget films. And that, I mean, I'm not saying one is more important than the other. It both are important, but I think you know that's probably what is going to set you apart, because when you get into that stage where you're making these films and campaigns, you will also understand those other things very well in order to become a holistic marketer. And the last advice would be, there is nothing called as marketing and sales. Both are demand generation.
Thank you, Kunal. I think that's some extremely like golden advice. I super resonate with that, and I believe this goes just beyond marketing and in all kinds of strategic top jobs, right? Where it's the conventional, unboring stuff, as you say, which really helps you make a mark, and people get lost in other distractions sometimes. That this marks the end of our podcast. Thank you so much, Kunal. I think I myself learned so much talking to you over the last 1 hour. I hope the other folks who are also tuned in right now can say the same. I hope you had a good 1 hour and you enjoyed the experience.
Oh, absolutely loved it, Gavan. Thank you so much for again having me here. Thank you for making me squirm a bit in my seat. It was not visible on this with some of those questions that I had to really think about, but I had a blast. Thank you very much for having me here, and happy to connect again. At some other forum, and really talk more. I mean, I learn as much as probably you said you have learned.
That's so sweet, Kunal. Thank you so much once again. And for everybody who's tuned in so far, if you like another marketing leader like Kunal, very, very soon in our next episode, Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thank you.